started. Namaste and welcome everyone for today's webinar on the yoga of the Mahabharata. We have our wonderful faculty, Sri Raghu and Antanarayanan with us today, and some other folks who are going to engage in conversation with him. Namrata ji, thank you for joining. Radhakrishnan ji, glad to have you on. I'm, of course, Ankur Patel, Director of Outreach for Hindu University of America. Thank you all for joining today's webinar on the yoga of the Mahabharata. And so in this webinar, we're going to get an overview of the yoga of the Mahabharata. We're actually teaching a course with the same name, but what we're going to discuss today is kind of the archetypal characters from the Mahabharata and how they can apply to our own lives. And we're going to get into that through dialogue and some reflective conversation. We're going to develop some insights into our own psyche and patterns of the mind through some experiential engagement with the Mahabharata. We're going to talk about yoga as an integral science beyond postures, asanas, or breathing techniques, pranayama. Yoga is a lot more than that. It's an integral science. We're going to start to develop the Sakhi Bhava, the friendliness, and the Sakshi Bhava, the meditative listening, talk about it, discuss it, that allows us to listen to our own self and the others from deeper space. And one of the bottom lines is to evoke healing processes within oneself. So we're going to explore our psyche using stories of characters from the Mahabharata and aim to bring some clarity and meaning to our lives. And so our special guest, our faculty, the person leading us in this engaging conversation is Sri Raghu Anantanarayanan. And he's got his postgraduate degree in biomedical engineering from IIT in Chennai, but he's a trained yoga expert, teacher, and coach in the lineage of Sri Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, often referred to as the father of modern yoga. And he's had a long history that involves teaching yoga, but also applying it in our daily lives. He's the co-founder of the Sumedas Academy for Human Context, the Barefoot Academy for Governance, and Flame, Town Nowhere. And of course, he serves on the board of several companies, but he's now engaged in mentoring and sacred activities at Ritambara. And so that's an amazing initiative. You check it out. But with that brief introduction, let me hand it to Raghuji to get us started, and then we'll engage in conversation as we go through this webinar. If you haven't yet put in the chat where you're zooming in from, let us know. Anandji from Cincinnati, thank you for joining. I'm just going to put a quick little poll up. Just let us know if you've attended a webinar before, if you've taken a course, if you enrolled in a program at HUA. And with that, second time, let me give it to Raghuji to get us started.
Thanks a lot, Ankur. Nice to be back here. And that was a very, very nice introduction to the whole thing that we're going to be doing in this course. Maybe I should just start with a small overview like you were suggesting, and then let Radhakrishnan and Namrata, who will also be with me in the course, take on some questions. And yeah, we'll go from there, and then we'll open it out to people. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we need to be clear about, again, is what you had mentioned, Ankur, is that often yoga is confused with just asana and pranayama. And that's a huge mistake, because the text that talks about yoga is called the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And it's a very wide-ranging text, and it talks, in the Yoga Sutra itself, there is less than 5% of the Yoga Sutra that talks about asana and pranayama. About 60-70% of the Yoga Sutras, 195 sutras, about 70% or so talks about how the psyche is transformed. And all the questions that you would normally find in what is today called psychology are all covered in yoga. What is perception? What is mistaken perception? What kinds of problems happen in the psyche? How do you look at it? All of this is discussed in the Yoga Sutra. And this part is generally in the Yoga Sutra itself, it is referred to as Antaranga Yoga. Whereas the asana and pranayama and some other things are referred to as Bahiranga. Yeah. So the external faculties and the deeper inner faculties. And it is necessary to go through the Antaranga practice if one has to look at what is called Parama Antaranga Yoga, which has to do with deeper aspects of one's capability, like dhyana and samadhi and so on. You can't jump to dhyana and samadhi without having gone through the transformative practices of Antaranga Yoga. Now, this is not only stated in the Yoga Sutras. If you have to study the Vedanta also, you have exactly the same qualifications. You have to have already internalized Vairagya and Viveka and become quite adept at what Vedanta calls the Shat Sampat. So that is Antaranga Yoga. And one of the things that is often misunderstood is as though yoga is something separate from dance and theater and all of the other things that happen in this space of in Indic thought, they're not separated. They're just different aspects of deep inner exploration. So Krishnamacharya, for instance, in his classes, would always refer back to either the Ramayana or the Mahabharata or the Bhagavata to illustrate what he was talking about in the Yoga Sutra. So this is important to keep in mind. And so that is why when we are offering you this course, we're calling it the Yoga of Mahabharata, because through looking at each of these 5 Pandavas and their counterpoints, we're going to help people, including ourselves. We do this, because it helps us to teach this. So every time we understand and try to explore who these characters are, what is happening inside them, we learn something about ourselves. Yeah. So all the practices we're going to use are actually drawn either from theater or from dance. And these are dance and theater are part of total Antaranga practice. Yeah. So with that introduction, let me ask Namrata and Radhakrishnan to join, because I get frozen when I have to keep speaking into a box. I'd rather have a chat with human beings, even if it's virtual.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Go
yes,
ahead, Namrata.
Namrata and or Radhakrishnan,
Mm.
Yes.
any of you can
Go
start.
ahead, Namrata.
Yes, Raghu. Thank you for that brief introduction into the program. You touched upon why we have kind of gone ahead with titling it as the Yoga of Mahabharata. Yeah. It'll be very interesting to also know what this program is offering as against just doing a regular parayanam or reading or listening or studying the Mahabharata itself. If you can just let us give us a glimpse of what is the approach that this offering is really going to take on.
Okay. Yeah. See, the reason why we are referring to dance and theater also in this context of studying Antaranga Yoga is because Antaranga Yoga is all about how I, as a person, interact with the world and what is happening inside me that gets reflected in my behavior and so on. Now, the interesting thing is that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata are called Itihasa Purana.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Itihasa means, is this, wow, is this the way it happened? Kind of a thing would be a fair translation of Itihasa, Itiha. And Purana is a very interesting word. Purana means Pura Api Navam, which means that which is ancient and yet is nascent and new. And how these Puranas become new is because the entire drama that is represented in the Purana is happening inside me today. It's all about the psyche, each one of us, our psyches, and how this whole drama is being played out in our psyches. Like one of the ideas that's discussed is that the whole of the Mahabharata is happening in the psyche of Vyasa. It's happening in the Buddhi, Vyasa's Buddhi. Yeah, and Vyasa, at one level, you can look at him as a human being. At another level, you can look at him as our own insightful Buddhi. Because that's the level of Buddhi, the Medas and so on, which allows you to have great insights into reality. So if I look at the Mahabharata as a mirror unto myself, then the entire reading of the Mahabharata becomes completely different from reading it as a story of something that happened 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 years ago.
Sure.
Yeah? So that's what we're going to try and do. We're going to try and read stories and then ask the question, where am I behaving like Yudhishthira? And where is this behavior coming from? And when I ask these questions, I touch what is archetypal about each of these 5 characters, whatever they're normally called characters, we will refer to them as archetypes. Yeah, so there's a Yudhishthira archetype. And the moment I say archetype, I mean that this is a propensity that is universal. All human beings have the characteristics that we see in Yudhishthira in its essential form. So to have the fundamental propensities of Bhima, I don't have to be Dara Singh, I don't have to be a wrestler, and so on. I can be a young person like Namrata or a highly bearded fellow like Radha Krishnan and still have the propensities of Bhima playing out through me. Right? And what is exciting about the Mahabharata is it's so well crafted in the story that it shows you both. It shows you the characteristics which are dharmic unfoldings of these propensities, and it also contrasts it with the opposite, the counterpoint. So for each of these 5 Pandava archetypes, you have the unfolding of the same archetype in a way that is adharmic. So if you look at Bhima and if you look at Duryodhana, I'm taking these because they're quite popular figures. They're actually the same archetype. They're adventurous, they're powerful, they're very impulsive, and so on. And they have the same teacher, Balrama. And their identicality is reflected in the symbolism of both of them being Gadadharis. That they have the same weapon, which is a reflection of my inner capacities. And yet, in every situation which requires a dharmic behavior, you find Bhima behaving in one way, you find Duryodhana behaving in another way. So through that, I can get in touch with my own archetype, look at when I am making choices which are more like Duryodhana or more like Bhima, and so on. So that's what we'll be helping people to do in the program. And this is how the book ought to be read. And this is not my personal idea. Sutankar has also said this in a very influential paper. So I'm just taking forward what my teacher has told me, what many scholars have also said about this.
Sure.
So, Raghu, we are so used to reading these Mahabharatas as a story, as you said, which happened 7,000, 5,000 years ago, and quickly jump to judge saying, if I was Yudhishthira, I wouldn't do this. If I was Arjuna, I would have done it. Versus an internal Antaranga Yoga experience process that we're going to offer through this. When we heard Ankur talk about the listener and the
Sakhi and the
observer,
Sakshi.
Sakhi and the Sakshi, the listener and the observer, would you tell us a little more about it?
Yeah. See, when I'm looking at these characters far away, I become a judge. In my mind, I am judging the behavior of these people and saying good, bad, and so on, which is marginally useful. Yeah, I might learn something by looking at it and saying, this is bad behavior, this is good behavior. Yeah, but that is not really very useful. Yeah, it might be very good for debates, but it's not useful for my internal growth. Now, one of the practices that we'll be helping people to look at is, how do I discover that quiet spot in me from which I can look at myself with curiosity and with compassion? Yeah. Often what happens is, when we sit back and introspect, and all of Antaranga Yoga is introspection, the voice of the judge is what comes up, and we look at our own behavior and start judging our own behavior. Right? And judging one's behavior often leads to self-accusation, guilt, regret, shame, and so on. And in yoga, these things don't have a place. They do not enable inner transformation. So this is very explicit in dance, where the Sakhi becomes the representative of the inner voice. And through a discussion with the Sakhi is the friend inside. So the Sakhi looks at the Nayika and looks at the Nayika honestly, but with great deal of compassion. So there is no judgment. There is a deep understanding. And through the understanding, one can also go deeper and say, where is this behavior coming from? So the Yoga Sutras talk about habitual patterns, samskaras and vasanas. Yeah, there was a very interesting discussion I had with a friend the other day, a psychologist, who was saying, why can't you look at the Mahabharata as a story of what happens to children because of their parents? I thought it was a very, very interesting question, because one can explain all of Duryodhana's behavior through the way his parents indulged in him. One can look at the Pandavas also from the point of view of the way Kunti dealt with them. And all of Bhishma's issues were because of how he and the relationship he had with his father and with his stepmother and so on, right? And, one of these great people who has written about the Mahabharata has called the Mahabharata a compendium of psychological case studies. Yeah. Girindra Shekhar Bose, who is considered the first psychologist in India, has actually called it a compendium of case studies. He's called it the best compendium of case studies. Now, I have to look at myself, not as a case study, but as a real human being undergoing certain issues and all the problems I'll be going through in a context. I will see reflected in the Mahabharata, so I can look at myself. Yeah,
It's,
and
um,
I need an ability to also witness myself without getting caught with. Yeah, so I have to find that quiet, friendly spot. All of us have it. We have to say no to the judge. We have to say no to interpreting ourselves like as victims and so on, and look at ourselves honestly. Yes, Radhakrishnan, you're asking something.
If one is coming new to this process of Antaranga Yoga, as against reading, like what Namrata said, reading or listening to Puranas, is there any prerequisite one would have to bring in coming into this path?
No prerequisite. Actually, most people, when they read, some part of them is actually doing self-reflection. Yeah, for myself, if I can't have a dialogue with the author when I'm reading a book, I can't go read the book. Yeah, so I'm assuming that most people will be having some kind of an internal dialogue. We're just helping people to externalize the dialogue to a certain extent and to understand how to have a good dialogue internally. Because finding the Sakhi and Sakshi inside me is the learning. We're not teaching people about Mahabharata, actually. We're teaching people how to have a dialogue with the Sakhi and the Sakshi inside.
You also spoke about the dharmic and the adharmic sides that get illustrated through the epic itself. How would you think some of this is useful or important for us to practice in today's times, and especially given various leadership paradigms that we are existing in, and even various social paradigms that we exist in? How would you place the Mahabharata and the way in which we are approaching this in today's times as such?
See, this is, I think, the fundamental of the whole thing. If I look at it as a Purana, Pura Abhinavam, take that Pura Abhinavam meaning. And if I look at the human condition, I don't think the human condition has changed very much over the last 4,000-5,000 years. Yeah, we still violent people. We still have exactly the same problem, but the context might look different. Yeah. And, having said that, the first thing to do when you're looking at the Mahabharata is not to look at it from a historical context, like we said before. Right? And then the second is to understand what the word dharma means, which is repeatedly talked about in the Mahabharata. The meaning that is used in the Mahabharata for the word dharma is what is it that sustains life? And if I expand it a little, which is given elsewhere, I don't know if it comes in the Mahabharata or not, it's very clear. It says, what actions enliven me, enliven my immediate context and the world simultaneously? That is what is yoga, is dharma. Yeah. And the way to be able to act in a dharmic way, every context I come to, is by doing my own yoga, by working within myself, inside me. Yeah. Now, there's a very beautiful story that I came across recently, which I think illustrates this, and I'm very fond of this story. Yeah, it's about this person who's having one of these coffee takeaways apparently in his hand, and he gets into a crowded bus or some such thing is what the story says, and somebody jostles him. So obviously this coffee will spill on his nice white shirt and on other people, and he gets very angry with the person who jostled him. And there's a Zen master standing next to him, and he says, there's no point getting angry with everybody. Whatever spills depends on what you're carrying in your cup. Yeah. So if I'm carrying a Bhima-like propensity inside me, whenever my cup is jostled, the Bhima Swabhava in me is going to spill out. If it's a Duryodhana type of Swabhava, that is what will spill out.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Right? So how do I look at this and how do I cleanse it? How does this become a Shuddha Sattva? How does this inside Prakriti of mine understand, first of all, what samskaras it is carrying, what habitual patterns it's carrying, because that's the pattern that's going to spill out. Yeah. And this is what Krishnamacharya would often talk about. He says a person who really understands yoga, you find out because all the 5 yamas, for example, ahimsa, is a spontaneous, natural response to the world. It's not a forced response to the world. So the mark or the measure of a person who is a yogi is not that he sits for 5 hours in so-called meditation or something like that, but what spills out from inside this person when he engages with other people in the world. Is it himsa? Is it ahimsa? What is it? Is it dharmic? Is it adharmic? And if you look at the Mahabharata from this point of view, every story is about this. Every encounter that Duryodhana has, what's spilling out is envy. And
So if I
all his
build,
capabilities, no, all his abilities that he has, then gets completely colored by this envy. And he can't use himself in any other way. Luckily for us, we're not entirely Duryodhanas, nor are we entirely Bhimas. So we can discover, we can be choiceful.
I was
Yes,
just going to come to
Radhakrishnan.
the point. I was just going to come to the point of choicefulness. The dharma and the adharma, as we hear you, is like a choice that is there in every single context that one is
Of course,
facing.
of course.
And how fast my pattern takes over versus my practice supports, I think will be the difference in the response.
No. We have to look at it slightly differently. My practice is to understand what is spontaneously coming out.
Ah,
And what yoga does is it helps us to look at these patterns from a place which is not coercive, which is not judgmental, which is not self-punishing and so on. Therefore, it helps us to discover other ways and helps us to dissolve the patterns that are impacting us. It's not that the practice comes forward or that practice comes forward. That is, in modern terms, behavioral modification. That is not what we are talking about. That is the same as what Namrata asked before. Now I read this and I say, oh, I must always behave like Yudhishthira and whatever, which actually is not possible. But I can at least force myself into certain kind of rigid stances. That's not what it's
right.
talked about. Transformation in yoga is through dhyana. That's the Sakhi and Sakshi Bhava I talked about. So when I learn to observe myself in a way that is full of attentiveness, complete attentiveness in the dynamic reality of the moment, that dhyana has a force, that dhyana has an agni. So through these processes, we are learning how to awaken the dhyana agni within us. So we first do it like any good, sports person will first try out his game, in the net practice. No, you have to have a practice space with a coach in
Yes.
which you learn how to hit the ball properly. And then you go into the match. So if I have not learned how to awaken this dhyana agni in a safe space, like what we're going to offer in the program, how will I ever discover it when I am in the actual situation where there's a choice to be made, which has a price to be paid? So the practice is to enable the cleansing of this coffee cup that I'm carrying and make it an empty thing.
Wonderful. We have some questions in the chat, Raghu.
Yeah. Can we have people to speak to us directly, Ankur?
Yeah, I can unmute people if you raise your hand or make a specific comment that
that'll
you'd
be,
like to speak, then I can
that'll
do
be
that.
nicer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have some
Thank you.
people
That'll
who
be
actually
great.
wrote their questions, like Namrata ji was saying, in the chat and the Q&A box. Namrata ji, if you want to facilitate those questions, you can do that. And I'll check in with people if they can raise their hand and they want to speak or they make a specific comment in the chat, then I can give you the
Yeah, to make
I
it
can either
easier
promote
for
you to
me.
panelist and then you have to accept
Yeah.
and then we can see you and you can unmute, or you can just speak and I can just give you that permission as well.
Yeah, it'll help me, instead of disembodied voices which are
Yes.
being translated, maybe something will be lost in the translation.
Yes. Kundanji has a question.
Yes, I'd
Kundan,
love to see Kundanji. Hi, Kundan.
yeah. I can read out his question in case he's not on. What about asking myself, what would Yudhishthir or Bhim or Arjun, etc., do in this situation in my life? Which character?
Then you're really asking
Hmm.
how the Yudhishthira in me will respond. That's the same question. I cannot ask a question of an imagined Yudhishthira. Who is imagining Yudhishthira? I'm imagining Yudhishthira. So it's my mind that is throwing up this particular picture. So the real question is not out there of somebody else, but really to ask myself. Yeah. And in our program, we do not encourage this third person out there speculation, but it's a waste of time. Speculating about somebody in some book is a waste of time. But when I imagine Yudhishthira, I am imagining Yudhishthira. So that Yudhishthira that I'm imagining is my inside that is showing up in this picture. So the right question is, who am I? And that's the key question in any Antaranga Yoga process. The key question is, who am I? And through these books, we are looking at who am I. Sorry, I mistook you for another Kundan, who's a very good friend. So I was wondering, how come that Kundan is asking this question?
So we have a few people who have been able to join us as panelists. And if you turn on your camera, then you will pop up here as Kundanji did, and then he turned it off. Glad to have you on, Srinathji.
Yeah, Srinathji.
So
Vanakkam. Namaste.
Namaskar. Very nice to see you, Raghuji.
Yes, same here, Sri.
Yeah. I had a question that this is probably from our past. Okay, in the sense that I had learned from you, and that has triggered this question. Like, I know that our understanding would some way help us in what we are going through. And I'm going to join your course for sure. Okay, and
Super.
to learn more. And because I think that I have heard you a couple of times, but I still don't think I really understand it. So I want to join. Now,
I
post
also,
that, yeah, when how is our understanding going to help improve our leadership in the sense that we always have other people that we interact with, and when we do interact, there is we want to understand the other person. Okay, for now I will call the opposite person, may not be opposite in a technical term.
sure,
So
sure.
how will this help, this understanding help you understand the other person? Because whether it is negotiation, whether it is working with somebody, this interaction, how do you think? How do you be able to help
See,
me understand?
yeah. Good question. See, Srinathji, the way I understand this, according to yoga, is I'm actually not perceiving anything outside of me. I am interpreting signals that come to me through my senses. So when my inner self is covered with samskaras, whatever I see gets filtered through the samskaras. So I actually don't see the outside as it is. Yeah, in the Yoga Sutra, it's called Tatstha Tadanjanata. So a critical thing for anything, whether I'm in a leadership position or in a negotiating position or wherever I am, is to be able to see the outside exactly the way it is. For that, I have to cleanse my samskaras. Yeah, so through this, now these 5 characters are so beautiful because 5 is a wide enough number. It gives enough complexity. At the same time, it is simple enough for us to comprehend. There are too many characters. It's very difficult for us to keep track of all of this. Right? And when I cleanse myself inside me, and if you're speaking to me, and if you're coming through from a Yudhishthira space or an Arjuna space or whatever, my inside will vibrate in a way, and I can then translate that vibration into saying, this is probably a person who is more Yudhishthira type or Bhima type or so on. Yeah. And the other thing that Krishnamacharya would say often is, if my pulse rate is 5 beats lower than whoever I'm negotiating with, I'll always win the debate.
Amazing. Yeah. Well.
Yeah. So all of that will definitely happen. The more I'm in touch with the Sakhi and Sakshi inside me, right, the more I'm going to be calm and listening to you. Yeah. So the more I can listen, the more I understand. Right. And this also is talked about in the Yoga Sutra, that all communication starts with listening. So who is the listener is what we're going to understand. And then everything else will follow.
Yeah.
I'm going to help one anonymous attendee who has written this question. Would someone going through anxiety challenges benefit from this course? Someone who's self-depreciating, having self-doubts, self-anxiety, will this course help this person?
Yeah, one of you has to answer. Radakshan, Namrata, or there are other people I'm seeing who've been through some of these courses before. Yeah, you have to answer, no?
Let me answer this. Good, Raghu. Thank you for giving this cue for me to answer. I don't know the name. I'll call it anonymous attendee only. I, in my corporate career, have faced some situations where an authoritative figure would come and just submerge me into water virtually. So over a period of time, I had lost this capability. Although I was a vibrant guy, I lost this capability to face up to any authoritative figure. So that was really like a self-depreciating situation, a self-doubting situation. and always anxious about the person whom I'm going to face in front of me. And about 5.5 years back, I came across offerings from Ritambara, got in touch with Raghu, etc., and did several such courses in the past. Helped me to figure out where in me is this self-doubt triggering from. Who in me is receiving that authoritative figure? How in this person in me is receiving that person? And the more I am trying to watch that instead of watching that so-called authoritative figure, the more the size of the depreciating figure started actually depreciating. Yeah, I used to choke a lot. Not just with authoritative figure, as a friendly figure like Raghu. Only because he is my teacher, when I used to come to him, I'll simply choke, I can't speak. Versus today, I'm able to come in as a panelist to speak to Raghu, ask him questions. Yeah, it's about watching me than the person in front of me.
Good.
Can I add to this? This is Karthik Shyamsundar.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, hi.
Namaste, Raghuji.
Namaste. Hi, Karthik.
Yeah. So I just want to say that I actually took Raghuji's class. In fact, me, my wife, and my mother-in-law, we all took the Antaranga Yoga class. And before that also I was studying the Vedanta. But after taking the Antaranga Yoga class and after taking the Yoga Sutra class, the Vedanta that I was studying started making more sense. And the Antaranga Yoga class, the fishbowl exercise that you used to do, it was just amazing because that's the one, all the stuff that you talk about in terms of coffee cups and things like that, all the cleansing that you talk about, it started making sense because I would read the story, I would come in and I would have an interpretation of that particular story, and I would be in the fishbowl and I'm saying, that is not the way I read the story. That is not the way I reacted. And the way I reacted to that story or to that character would be different from the way my mother-in-law reacted and my wife reacted. And then we would have our own Antaranga Yoga right after the class and we'll figure out why is it that we are reacting this way. It was a fascinating class. I want to tell everybody it's an amazing class. I think your knowledge of Vedanta also will change when you actually take this class and recognize the cleansingness that you're going to do with this. It's just fascinating. I just want to say that to what is
Ankur, you should give a discount for family memberships. If
actually,
more than
it's not a bad idea.
From a family
if you can
comes
have
in,
the whole
Ankur, you should give them a discount.
Yeah, if the whole family can take the class,
so
it's just
fascinating.
amazing.
That's so fascinating, Karthik. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I really appreciate what
Absolutely.
you have done for me in that class. I was afraid before taking the class. I was like, oh my God, will some of my past things will come out and things like that? No, nothing will come out. Everything will just cleanse out. everything will just disappear. That's what it is. And it is a practice, just like it is a practice. It is not like class le liya, khatam ho gaya and you're done. But at least it's the beginning of you start recognizing where you're making the mistakes and what is it that you need to correct. Where is your glasses tainted and what do you need to clean up so that you can look at the world clearly. It's just amazing. I'll stop at that and I'll let others speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining, Karthik Ji, and making that testimonial. I know you've taken a lot of courses at HUA, and appreciate you joining.
I've taken a lot of classes. I do want to say that until I took the Antaranga Yoga class and the Yoga Sutra class, many of the classes made sense, but it made even more sense. All these other classes made a lot more sense to me. And the whole Itihasa, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, there's a lot of stuff that made a lot of sense. And your explanation of Sankhya Yoga was amazing. Which was very, very critical. You spent a lot of time on that. So I appreciate that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have maybe Deepika Ji next, and then Mani, who have come on screen to share or ask a question. I'm not sure exactly, but you're right, Raghuji. It's great to have actual people engaging as opposed to disembodied voices.
Yeah.
Deepika Ji?
Yes. So hi.
Hi.
I'm asking a question, actually, not a comment, because I've just about started my journey in questioning. I'm not like somebody who just spoke, who's read and studied it a lot. I've just started. So I wanted to just ask you to go back to the concept of Sakhi, the two concepts that you mentioned. I didn't quite get the Sakhi and Sakshi concept. Would you mind explaining that again?
See, there is a very interesting yoga book called the Tripura Rahasya. In that book, there's a lady called Hema Choda who teaches her husband what yoga is all about. And the central idea in that is, how do you understand the Karta, the Sakhi, and the Sakshi within?
Okay.
Yeah, the Karta is the one who's acting. We have to have this actor who's engaging with the world all the time. But the actor can be filled with fear, he can be filled with doubt, he can be filled with many, that's the coffee cup I'm referring to.
Right.
Yeah. Now, what we usually do is when we engage with the world and things don't work out the way we want it to, we become very critical of ourselves. That's because that's how we are taught. Yeah. There are very few of us who have had people, teachers, or parents who have been our Sakhis and Sakshis. We
Okay.
mostly have teachers and parents who are critical, who are angry, and so on. And, we get put into an accused situation. And yeah.
Yeah.
So none of that helps. None of that helps to understand myself. Right. Now, the Sakhi is a figure that you also find in dance, and Sakshi is actually Krishna. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
And the Sakhi, if you remember, if you look at these dances, Radha will talk to the Sakhi and say, "What is happening to me, Sakhi?" And the Sakhi doesn't give a judgment. The Sakhi doesn't say, "Do this or do that." There'll be a beautiful conversation where the Sakhi will say, "Hey, this is what is happening to you. You're getting caught with envy. You're getting caught with this," and so on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And as the Nayika learns how to become more quiet, the Sakhi leads the way
Okay.
to Krishna. And then the Sakhi will disappear, and then Radha will have a meeting with Krishna. So all of
Okay.
these people are inside us, except that we
Right.
don't know how to awaken them. We learn how to awaken the actor because you have to. You don't have any other goal. But then
Right.
along with it, we end up learning how to awaken either the victim inside us or the reactive person inside or the judge inside or so on, or the escapist and so on. So recognizing this is the first step.
Right.
And then there are other voices, other selves waiting inside us. Sakhi is very much inside us. So we just need to recognize it and start awakening it. And that's the practice Karthik ji was talking about. Once you start recognizing it and you start awakening it, then your internal conversation becomes very different. You don't get caught with guilt and all of these very wasteful feelings.
Right.
And you can actually use your inner capability to transform.
Sounds
Uh,
okay.
As a
Thank
student
you.
of Raghuji, I just want to say that is one of the first things that I actually learned. The first things that I learned about was the Sakhi Bhava and Sakshi Bhava from Raghuji's class. Because when you go through a traumatic experience, you can be critical of yourself. And one of the things that you're going to learn, and the Sakhi Bhava is very, very important because you become very critical of yourself. Forget about other people criticizing you. You become critical of yourself. So learning to love yourself, we hear all these great statements, love yourself and things like that. You will understand how to learn to love yourself, irrespective of what is happening to you. And that is the idea of the Sakhi Bhava, just like the friend. Anandji, I'm sorry, I'm just repeating what you've taught me. So I don't know if I'm
No,
wrong.
no, no,
Let me
perfect.
know. It's
Perfect,
to understand
Karthik.
that love within yourself and to really value you, no matter what the traumatic experience is. Because when you go through a traumatic experience, there is a part of you that will say, I
You're
did
an idiot.
this. It was I did this. And there's a lot of guilt that you'll walk through. And the Sakhi Baba, Sakhi will tell you, no, you did what you had to do. It's okay. And you'll move forward with that. This, all these Western thing that you hear about, learn to love yourself and all this stuff, you will understand the right term is Sakhi Baba and Sakshi Baba. And Sakhi Baba is that. I learned that in this class.
Thank you, Karthik.
Super.
Wonderful. Let me put in the chat right now a link to the course that's coming up, Yoga the Mahabharata, the Antaranga Yoga. It's going to be on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. That's 8:30 p.m. India time. It's going to start January 11th. So that's coming up soon. You have some time to register, but please, this is the kind of, I think, conversation you engage in the class and work through. So this is pretty interesting and exciting. Maniji, do you want to go next?
Thank you, Ankur. I would echo a lot of things which have been said out here by Srinathji and other people. I took this class in 2000 or 2001, if I recall, through HUA. So I have a quick question for Raghuji. In terms of timeline, I still work through a lot of what is going on within me using the Antaranga Yoga principles, and it's been a fantastic journey of unwinding and unfolding, so to speak. In terms of what people they want everything to be done tomorrow, and we're all in a hurry to get all this knowledge. Okay, I go through this class, will I be masters tomorrow or a PhD tomorrow kind of thought process. How would you ask us to come in to this class in terms of what Baba, in terms of timeline and other thought process that we should come in with?
See, the 2, 3 answers, Mani. One is, people forget that the Buddha took 100 births to get to where he was. Okay. So I've read somewhere that each of us is given 88,000 births to get there. I don't know what the truth. I only know about this birth, right? Now, exactly like what Karthik ji was saying, no? See, once you learn the right thing to do, that doesn't take time. To get it, what is the Sakhi and what is the Sakshi? You'll have to search inside, because it's not like a cricket ball. I can show it to you and say this is the pink ball, this is a white ball, and this is a red ball, and all that. Something inside you. So I have to search for it. But because we are talking about it, and because in the group, when we are discussing, when somebody is actually speaking from there, you can recognize it. Okay. So when you yourself fall into that space, you'll know. Right? And that doesn't take time. The searching might take a little time, but knowing that, yeah, this is it, doesn't take time. Then I have to practice, because I have lived in a certain way for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. So that will be my spontaneous response, especially when there's a difficult situation. The tendency for me to go back on my old patterns is very high. Yeah. So unlearning those patterns is not going to happen overnight. Yeah. So that will take time and depends on the intensity of my engagement with myself, the intensity of my practice. Yeah. But once I've understood these, there is no going back.
There is one question from Annie, which is an important question, especially with HUA having a lot of registrants coming from the Western world. She says, I'm a Westerner and know very little about whatever is being told. And most of the terms I do not understand. However, I seem to be drawn here. So is there something that I need to have before I come here in terms of knowledge level?
No. Annie, I wish I could see you, but I honestly find it easier to deal with people who just read the story and comment without knowing too much. Maximum difficulty I've had in these classes is with people who know a lot, because I'm going to bring in a different perspective, and people who read and who already know the Mahabharata start fighting with me. They think I'm a heretic and so on. Yeah. So it's very good. If you don't know very much, that's fine. You don't need to know the Sanskrit terms, right? Some of the Sanskrit terms, unfortunately, cannot be translated so easily. So we'll try. So for example, the Sakhi is a friend with him, but the friend doesn't capture the whole meaning of the word Sakhi, which is why I said, can you look at yourself with compassion and curiosity? The Sakshi, the closest English translation is a witness. Even that doesn't capture it fully. Yeah. So in any case, the words are not as important as the discovery of that part of myself and the discovery of how to look at myself. Yeah. And very often what I find is people who don't know very much, who haven't read it, come with very, very fresh perspectives. You look at the stories in a very different way because you've not been already conditioned to look at the story in this or that way. So it'll be great for the class if you come in, and hopefully it'll be good for you.
There is one more question. I think Dinika ji is asking, do people ever retake the class?
Oh, yes, they do. One is me. I retake the class every year.
Shall I answer this as well, Raghu?
I would
Yeah,
also love
sure.
to print my
Yeah.
2 cents here. I think some of these things, each time I've kind of looked at it, it feels like very new, as though it seems like I wasn't there in the previous class. I don't know, it's just very new. And of course, that some terms and some initial foundations, the practice may be known, but the discovery is definitely very new and fresh each time we take it. This has been my experience, having done this couple of times. What do you think, RK? How has it been for you?
In fact, we did discuss about it this afternoon, Namrata and myself, the same point that when I look at, say, the video or any of the stories that I read again, I almost wonder whether I slept in the earlier class because the new insights of
Maybe you
that
did.
have come in.
Maybe you did.
Maybe. No, I'm talking about the new insights. But
Yeah.
another thing that came up, I just had a drawing here, is it's like I took the class and I'm not starting the circle again here. I go a little inside when I take it again, and I go a little inside. And as I take the class again, not many times, but I practice, then I go to the real silent self mind. So I felt like those spiraling
Spiral.
curve
Yeah.
inwards.
Correct. Correct. Srinath ji has had his hand up for a while, yeah.
Raghuji, I just wanted to answer the question earlier also. Same thing. Well, it's been a couple of years since I took your class. And but I feel that I'm a different person now than I was 2 years ago. So it has a very different meaning now. Like, for example, one time one of our teachers was explaining the same thing that the Bhagavad Gita you teach to a 9th grader versus somebody with a college degree, somebody who is doing a PhD, and the way they take it will be much different. This is how they explain the same book. See, it's the same book, right? After all, same textbook. So that's how I am feeling. Now that's the reason why I want to take. In fact, I have registered already now to your class. I'm looking forward to it.
Super. That's why, Sriji, these are called darshanas, no? Because you're looking at your own reflection. So when you looking at your own reflection through the book, you will see something new if you look at it with fresh eyes. And this helps you a lot. Helps you, it gives you a lens through which to look at yourself. So definitely will help. I've studied the Yoga Sutra God knows how many times and looked at the Mahabharata equal number of times. So every time, like Radhakrishnan was saying, you see something and you say, oh, wow, I didn't see this before. That's the beauty of these books. Now, whoever wrote it, now whoever that Vyasa was an absolute genius. Because the depth that is there in the stories, I just marvel every time I read it at the beauty of the structure of the story, how they have juxtaposed characters, how they have created situations. It's just incredibly good.
Ankur, there's a question on recordings. Will it be available? Maybe you want to take that.
Yeah. All the recordings, I mentioned it, will be sent to everyone who registered. And I love the people who are going to take the second course at HUA. But for your first timers, we have a whole learning management system. You get your @hua.edu email address. We have again, in the learning management system, week by week, all the readings, the Zoom links, the assignments. It's all put up there. And it's very accessible. It's easy to engage in. And you can get recordings of courses, classes if you miss a session. I know somebody said that as well.
No.
No, this
Ankur,
one is not available,
in
right?
this
This is a
one, you're not
special
available
course where we're not
because,
sharing. Right.
a lot of people are sharing from their lives. So if you have a recording, you lose the context. And there's a definite kind of context that gets created in the class of people who trust each other and all of that. If you're looking at it from the outside without being in the class, that gets lost.
Correct.
So we're not recording it because from the first time, we've had people who not liked the idea of recording it and having it played back.
Totally understandable. Thank you for explaining that. But the webinar itself, the one that we're on, this recording will be sent out, but not the courses itself. So if you have a little time conflict with this course, maybe the next session would be better, or if you want to take that, it's up to you, I guess.
No, choose this one, Ankur, choose. If there's a time conflict, choose this one.
That's a good answer. Yes.
Good one. But Ankur, if somebody misses a class, the recording of the discussion will not be there, but the LMS that you have will still hold the stories that they can go back and read and reflect upon.
Great. I do have the poll up. Please let us know if you're interested in taking this course. I think it's, how many people do we have? Oh, no, I haven't launched it yet. Let me launch it right now. Please let us know if you're interested in taking this course. Starting in January, Yoga the Mahabharata. It was previously called Antaranga Yoga, but it's the same concept as was discussed. And then we have 2 retreats coming up at the end of December. Raghuji, you also have to host a retreat.
Okay,
Get you to
we'll
come
do
out
that.
to our campus in
Sure.
Florida.
We'll do that.
Yes. I'm sure your students would love to meet you in person and have these in-person conversations as well. Next time you're in the States, we'll make sure that we plan around that. So the poll is up.
Sure.
Please let us know if you're interested in taking this course. There we go. Anybody else on the panel who hasn't had a chance to speak? I know some people raised their hands and I just kind of promoted them. Please turn on your camera and ask, otherwise I'll hand it back.
Can you recommend the read prior to the course, the book?
Yeah. Kamala Subramaniam's Mahabharata.
Yeah.
That's the most accessible, easiest book to read. It's quite complete.
Yeah.
Okay, this is your last chance to get in your questions, comments, suggestions, whatever it is that you'd like to share. And maybe we'll go around one time with our panelists and get into some closing thoughts. I think we got through all the questions. Yes, great. It's always my pleasure to host this, and then Raghuji, I'm glad that you prompted inviting more folks to join, and Karthikji, I'm glad that you were able to join. Shriji, Shri Srinaji, amazing to have you on as well, and everyone, thank you for joining and engaging in this interesting conversation. So let's, I guess, go around the panelists, and we'll end with Raghuji.
Ankurji, I just can allow me to turn the camera on, and I want to show I have the book that Raghuji recommended in my hand.
Oh, lovely.
This is the book, and maybe I need to, can you see this?
Yeah.
This is the one. It's a little thick, but it should be wonderful reading. Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sri.
There was a question on men versus women on the archetype. So, Raghuji, I think there was a general related question. So,
No, archetypal, there's no gender in archetypes.
Yeah, I had answered it virtually to the person who had asked that archetypes are not
No,
gender
we're just
based.
looking at certain human qualities like, love for adventure. It's all the same. There might be some differences in the form that one can take, because of who I am. But it is not gendered at all.
Is there a textbook for the course? No. How about your book, Raghu, on Antaranga Yoga?
But that's not a textbook for the course. There are two books, 5 Seats of Power and this. Yeah, we'll recommend those. They can read it, but it's not really a textbook for the course.
Yeah.
We have Kavita and Kiran wanting to ask something.
Yeah.
Hi, Raghu.
Hi, Kavita.
I'm sitting in a dark room. So you will have to listen to my disembodied voice.
Okay. Nice to hear you.
Yeah, lovely to be here. I've really enjoyed. But yeah, I can't put the light on right now. So I'm really sorry, guys. It's nearly midnight here. Yeah. So I think it was more of curiosity. I was the one who Radhakrishnan answered the question about gender in the archetypes, but I've always been curious because we also explore Draupadi and, there is Gandhari. So there are women embodied characters within the Mahabharata as well. But the one thing that's noticeable often is that on the 18 days on the battlefield, there's not mention of women. And you can see where I'm coming from. But this is a curiosity, really, about whether you think this is symbolic in some way.
The way I look at it, Kavita, is that femininity is my own inner vulnerability. And each of these 5 guys, their vulnerability is held by Draupadi. So in the stories, we're not going into this depth in the course here, but the way Draupadi deals with each of them is distinctly different. So the part of herself which she brings up with Yudhishthira or with Bhima are very different. So that's just the vulnerable inner side. Just like Krishna, I don't think is a separate person. Krishna is also a deep inner. That's the witness. The final witness in me is Krishna. So that's how I'm looking at it. but we can always explore this, because I see Gandhari, for example, as a counterpoint of Nakula.
Interesting. Of Nakula.
Completely self-sacrificing, so on and so forth.
Right. I'll have to think
But
about that.
except that it's a adharmic archetype.
Mm.
In order not to hurt her husband and so on, that's what is said out there. She blinds herself, and what's the consequence of that? She
Mm.
takes onto herself things that, in a negative kind of way, no? So
Right.
every one of them has a counterpoint, and
Mm.
it's masculine, feminine is not so important.
Mm. 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 Thank you. Thank you for, yeah, a lot of things got evoked, and maybe I'll sit with them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Karthik ji, why don't you go first with your kind of closing thoughts?
Sure. Namaste. I strongly recommend that every one of you who's thinking of taking this class, please take the class, because it was an enlightening class for me. And it made me, I remember, if you're going to be taking the class, one of the things, the first 2 classes, I would basically read the stories and come in and do the analysis of the story like a typical university. I teach at the university, so like a professor or as a student, analyzing a character. And Raghuji will consistently tell me, no, Karthik, what do you think about this? What is your opinion? So it took me 2-3 classes to actually say, oh, really, you're asking me to look into my own vulnerabilities. Okay, I get it now. So I think it's a class that allows you to really look at your own self and recognize the issues that you have, the vulnerabilities that you have, and how you can actually overcome all those issues. And it's going to be, you'll do the class, and then throughout the rest of your life, you'll actually use the class to actually, you know, get out of the mode that you're in. And what you will learn at the end is that you are not stuck. You have a way out. You're not stuck. You have a way out, because that's what I felt before the class. Because of wherever I was in at that time, I felt I'm stuck. I realized this feeling of stuckness is really how I'm looking at the world. And if I can change that, it would be really good. And for me, another thing, like I said, me, my wife, and my mother-in-law took the class at the same time. And when we read the stories and we responded to the stories differently, we actually understood each other better. Why my wife is reacting to the story this way, I never looked at it that way, and why am I reacting? And then we discussed, oh, those are the experiences. It's just fascinating. So please do take the class. And for me, I'm very much interested in all the story about Mahabharata and Ramayana. And the other thing that I learned was that I used to think, oh, these are all stories. Are they mythology? We would argue whether it's mythology, history, itihasa. None of those things matter. What matters is you. Then I realized that these, just like what Anandaram said, you know, what matters is these stories are written about to reflect about your own self. So when you actually attend a Mahabharata lecture, or when you attend a Bharatanatyam concert, or when you attend one of these musical programs, those stories are supposed to invoke those feelings within you, and that's what you do. So and like I said, after attending this class, all the 8 years of Vedanta classes that I took started making more sense to me. And I will stop at that. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here.
Super. Thanks a lot, Karthik.
Let's go with Srinathji.
Namaste. I think I already expressed my opinion. Actually, why I'm joining the class again, because it's every time we discover new things, and as I said, even why people are taking it again and again, there's a reason, right? And The very first time we went into great depth in multiple contexts because it was a yogi leadership class that Raghuji taught all this. But I still feel that there's more things for me to learn. So I highly encourage anybody, if it is their first time, you will start tasting the nectar. So please join.
Thank you. Radhakrishna ji?
Sure. To all the people who have attended this webinar, something has brought you here. That's because even unknowingly, you're trying to know the subtleties of your own true self. And that's this path that you're getting into when you get into Antaranga Yoga. And so it'll bring you back into the session for sure.
Mani ji?
For me, in is the only way out. So for Antaranga Yoga, this is beautiful way of going inside yourself so that you can figure out the world, right? I've heard this story about Pindanda, Brahmanda, and various other things which are said in there. I could never understand them, right? When I started going inside, I have the whole cosmos as well as the quantum world within me. That's a beautiful way of understanding Antaranga Yoga. So I would definitely encourage you to explore yourself.
Namrata ji?
Yeah, I think enough and much more has been shared. And yeah, don't wait. Just go ahead and register. Don't wait.
I like
Don't
Raghu's
wait,
point
just
of
register.
yeah, I like Raghu's point of saying if you're in a conflict, then this is the place to be in.
Mhm.
Certainly.
All
If you're
right.
not in a conflict, also is a good place to be.
It's been my pleasure,
Yeah.
and we'll give our closing thoughts to Raghuji. Raghuji?
Yeah, what can I say? Yeah, I enjoy teaching this. So I don't give up for chance whenever I get something because I learn a hell of a lot. So come, join, learn with me.
Wonderful. Namaste, Dhanyawad. Thank you, everyone. This was a special webinar. I'm glad that I was able to host, and thank you all for joining. Thank you so much. Please
Thanks a lot, Ankur. Thank you.
Very well done, Ankur.
Dhanyawad, everyone.
you.
Namaste.
Thank you, Karthik, Sri Ji, Mani,
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raghuji.
Bye-bye.
Namaste.
Bye-bye. Namaste.